Hello, friends. It was a rainy October night when Daniel Hayes' car broke down in the middle of rural Pennsylvania. He had been driving for hours, chasing autumn landscapes for his photography portfolio. The highway had long since vanished behind him, and the GPS on his phone showed nothing but a blank gray screen. The nearest sign of civilization was a flicker of warm light coming from a narrow side street, Blackwood Street. He followed the dim light until he came across an old boarding house. The sign above the door, barely hanging on by a single rusted nail, read Blackwood Inn since 1892. Daniel hesitated, but the rain had drenched his engine, and he had no choice but to knock. Inside, the air was stale, the kind that felt as though it hadn't moved in years. Behind the counter stood an old woman with a pale, paper-thin face. Her lips barely moved when she spoke. "Only one room left, dear," she said, her voice rasping. "Room 6, you'll have privacy there." Daniel signed the guest book. Every name before his was dated decades ago, most from the 1970s. He thought maybe the place had few visitors. He was wrong. Room 6 was at the very end of a long hallway. The wooden floorboards groaned under each step, the wallpaper peeling like dead skin. When he opened the door, a wave of cold air hit him, despite the radiator humming in the corner. The room smelled faintly of damp earth, like a grave after rain. But what unsettled him most was the mirror, a tall, oval mirror leaning against the wall, its surface slightly warped. As the evening wore on, Daniel grew increasingly uneasy. He paced the room, half considering leaving, then decided to stay. He collapsed onto the bed. The mirror seemed to mock him with its cold and blinking stare. Then he heard it again, the slow, deliberate scratching. It was coming from inside the mirror. He dismissed it at first, assuming it was just the old building settling, but when he sat up, the scratching stopped instantly, as though it knew he was listening. He tried to sleep, but at 3:07 a.m., he woke to the sound of whispering. It was coming from the mirror. He couldn't make out the words, but they were urgent, desperate, hungry. He grabbed his camera, thinking he could record whatever was happening, but through the lens, he saw something moving behind the glass, a pale figure. Long fingers pressed against the inside of the mirror, grinning with teeth too many and too sharp. The whispers grew louder. His own reflection slowly turned its head toward him, even though he hadn't moved. Its smile widened until the corners of its mouth split the skin. Then it whispered, perfectly clear, "You're not the first." Terror surged through Daniel. He stumbled back, knocking over the radiator. The glass rippled like water and hands shot out, cold and bone-thin, pulling him inside. The last thing he saw was the room empty now before the mirror sealed itself, leaving no sign anyone had ever been there. The next morning, the old woman at the counter checked her guest book. She turned to room 6's key, hanging neatly on the wall, and, with a satisfied smile, she scratched Daniel Hayes' name into the list. Below it, another name from 1978, the year before. The inn had gotten a new guest. Every night, the scratching began anew. The end.